Well, I'll introduce myself. I'm Tony Wilkinson from Panorama City and a founding member of Panorama City, as is my colleague Pam, that I'll introduce. And but actually, since at least on my screen he's right of me, I want to say how happy we are to have Joe Matthews here, one of the founding members of Zocalo Public Square. And he's got a direct democracy project at Arizona State Center for Social Cohesion that's really exciting, passionate about all these subjects. So Joe, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Pamela, do you want to tell us about your background?
I better unmute. Yes, I spent 42 years teaching elementary school music in the city of Los Angeles, everywhere from Sylmar to Watts and West LA to East LA. Never got to Harbor area. That's about the only corner of the city I never served. I am now happily retired and still working with UTLA, both with active people as treasurer for the UTLA Valley East area, and also a member of UTLA Retired. So, and then there's my activity with Panorama City Neighborhood Council, which brings me here before you today.
And actually what brings us all here, this is not something that's brand new, incidentally, but it has come to a head recently with some of the proposals from the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. There's long been a difference of opinion within the neighborhood council system, at least as I look out at our 99 different neighborhood councils and I see this happening. And some of the people, particularly some of the early founders who had formed neighborhood councils because they didn't like what was going downtown, and the city decided that they could defeat secession by giving us these little things called neighborhood councils that had no actual power but had advisory power, and maybe we would be happy. That's how neighborhood councils originated. But many people from that era still saw neighborhood councils in their own minds as little city councils, where they would basically be like a borough system running something that's actually empowered to them in their local neighborhoods. But of course, we don't have any power over anything. So the reality is, the city charter says neighborhood councils are here for only two purposes. One of them is to involve more people in government. And so just like none of us knew what the heck was going on in the city until we decide, oh, what's this neighborhood council thing? What's this Brown Act thing? What do you mean? And so we all discovered, and then when we discover, we say, my gosh, how can they vote 15-0 without talking with each other at the city council? But nevertheless, we discovered how it really works. But our job partly is to help the community understand how this government works so that everybody can have effective input, and together we can actually make change. So we're supposed to involve people beyond our board, the whole community in government, and together we're supposed to try and make government services more responsive in our own neighborhood. So that's why we're here. But to the extent that we do have the public meeting laws of official deliberative bodies created by a government institution, where it's a neighborhood council, we're an official deliberative body, even if we only advise, we're subject to the Brown Act. And the Ralph M. Brown Act says that we need to be completely transparent, that we shouldn't deal with each other behind closed doors and merely show up at the public meeting and magically vote 15-0 all yes, and you never figure out how we got there. So all of our deliberations need to be somehow transparent and in public, and we can't have meetings of a majority of the board members, or even less than that is a better rule, so that the public doesn't know these conversations are going on. That's the problem, the challenge that we face. Recently, in a new social media policy, obviously coming, we don't know who put it together. There were two people from the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners who were invited, but we've never discovered who else is in there. But we're pretty sure that the deputy city attorneys assigned to the department were in there. And the social media policy has come up, if you read it carefully, with this concept that if Pam or Doug or Tony talk about almost anything that could ever come before our board in social media or anything like that. Well, my gosh, what if you were in that chat room or whatever it was, and another board member came and listened to you? That could make a serial meeting. Well, wait a minute. This is a general issue, homelessness issues, for example. This is not the same as a particular proposal to say yes or no on a city council file. That's a specific proposal for authorizing cleaning up encampments or something like that. That specific proposal obviously needs to be protected from private conversation while it's live. But don't come and take away our free speech rights to talk about general subjects. So that begins to bring up the issue. Well, if anything could become a community impact statement, that's the famous CIS. That's the ability of a neighborhood council by name to put a resolution on a council file. That's a piece of legislation going through the city council with a local opinion. This is how it's going to affect us. And we don't like it, or we think it should be changed, or several other options. That's an important power. But there are people who know that we might be 15 or 20 people who look like Tony, who's an old white man sitting there debating in a neighborhood council meeting that nobody ever heard of. And so the elected official says, hey, fine, they don't like it, but who cares? It's just the neighborhood council. One of the issues is if there's something important to the community, maybe instead of doing the CIS and even coming up with the issue of having the serial meeting, maybe we say, we're not going to do a CIS on this. We're going to go out and take it to the public. We're going to have town halls. We may say there's this side, there's that side, but if you care, you better weigh in. What if we go and we have 10 or 15? The public can now file a letter. It doesn't say your name. It just says contribution from the public. The public can also use the electronic filing system to put their opinion on a council file. What if a little neighborhood council in Panorama City, one of 100, gets a dozen people to put something on a council file from their neighborhood? And one of the surrounding neighborhood councils do the same thing. Pretty soon they're going to say, what's all this public outcry? It's versus one community impact statement. So this is actually, the title is not about the community impact statement. It's the difference between running a boutique mini city council and running a community change organization, which is what we're here to talk about. So I don't know, Pam, do you have any other thoughts on this? Because this is our soapbox time.
Not specifically on this, but there is a subject that is near and dear to me that I plan to bring up before our session is done, but maybe we need to move on to Douglas or Joe.
Well, Doug, how about your opinion? Because then Joe can take us, okay, he's the Pied Piper. Tell us the roads we should be going down. Doug, what's your thought?
First of all, Tony, the only power that neighborhood councils do not have is the power they choose not to take for themselves. What we do is politics. Okay, we are legislative bodies. Frankly, it doesn't bother me that the city wants to call us unpaid employees and do whatever they think that they can get away with. It is what we determine to do for ourselves. I was elected. I consider myself an official of the city. And I think most of the people who are my constituents would agree with that, regardless of what Donna, the city attorney, or anybody else says. I come from a family, having grown up hearing stories about my great-grandfather in 1908, who was an organizer for the United Mine Workers. And on and on and on. We talk politics. We were involved in politics. We understand what a democracy is. we're the boss. And it's just a matter of numbers. I have told people, you give me enough time and a little bit of ability to organize and talk to people, I'll bring a mob to any commission meeting, any city council meeting, any neighborhood council meeting in this city, and I'll get what I want or what we want. That's how it works. I've seen a Board of Harbor Commissioners meeting where experts in air pollution got up and spoke about an issue, and then 50 longshoremen stood up in the back of the room, and guess how the commission voted? Okay, it's a numbers game. And if we at neighborhood councils are willing to do the hard work to organize, we can get whatever we want. I will point out that in my 20-year history, probably the single greatest accomplishment of that organizing ability by neighborhood councils came with a proposed development of 2,300 units that would have driven an additional 40,000 vehicles a day onto one street. Okay. My neighborhood council, the Northwest San Pedro Neighborhood Council, and the Harbor City Neighborhood Council all passed resolutions opposing that. And then what we did as individuals was to create a campaign. We gathered 15,000 petition signatures. This is before the internet and online petitions. We had over 100 volunteers giving of their time. We raised $10,000 and hired an attorney. Now that development 15 years later is under construction at 700, actually under 700 units. Okay. We did it. We've done it on other things, but it's a numbers game and it's hard work. And none of us should ever think that we don't have power. So that's my comment. But I want to hear from Joe. I want to see what's going on there.
Hi, I'm thank you for having me. I'm sure I'll say lots of things that seem off or just upset you. I want you to know it's thoroughly intentional. I really think we need to rethink how we do local government in the state. So you know about me, I'm a journalist who's, I'm a Californian. I write a weekly syndicated column about California, in addition to other duties of editing and organizing of free public events and other things at Zocalo Public Square. My column appears in 30 papers across the state each week. And then the thing that Tony mentioned that's actually pretty relevant here is that 13 years ago, I started with Swiss Broadcasting's global democracy correspondent, a wonderful fellow named Bruno Kaufmann, something called the Global Forum on Modern Direct Democracy. He's from Switzerland, I'm from California. We both were interested, we knew that direct democracy was growing around the world, but it was very hard to get rules and practice of how it was done because it's at the local and provincial, state, prefecture level all around the world, usually subnational, not so much at the national level. That experience, it's been sort of a sideline. It's never been a job. I've never been paid for it, but that network, we held big free public conferences 9 times in places from Taipei to Tunis, but it's grown to include an NGO in Cologne, Germany called Democracy International, which supports local democracy, direct democracy and participatory democracy work around the world. It includes an online think tank that actually now has a real home in Liechtenstein. It's called the Direct Democracy Navigator. Includes a new foundation in Switzerland with some money that we can support people doing this work, and perhaps significant that with the founding support of the mayor of Taipei, who is a political outsider, political independent, a surgeon who not a member of any political party, and won, and after a series of accidents, started an International League of Democracy Cities with an emphasis on trying to improve local democratic work and public participation in cities around the world. I think it's sort of telling that there are no American cities in the League of Democracy cities. This country is a laggard, and that's being kind when it comes to public participation. LA is one of the few cities that has a sort of a kind of an office of public participations in the Department of Personnel. It was done recently, has 3 people. Seoul has such an office of over 100 people. And you see it in sort of major cities in the world. This is how there's incredible amounts of support for citizens, for neighborhoods, for people in making their voices heard and listened to at every stage is a process. I mean, to go to Vienna and be from LA, Vienna has had in the last 20 years, is one of the fastest growing cities in Europe. Just where it is on the map, a lot of people have migrated to Vienna. And essentially they needed to build a second Vienna on the north side of the Danube. And, and they did this with public and participatory processes that began with the public, not coming to you with some developer agreement that had already been negotiated for an up or down vote or some sort of community impact statement. But, iterative participatory processes about what can go where, what should be done, what kind of things are needed, before any deal was struck or ground was broken. It's a different kind of approach, and we're seeing that around the world. We're also seeing some online things. I'll get to that. I want to make 3 impertinent suggestions to you, sort of grounded in the awful reality of living in a place that thinks it's a democracy, but isn't terribly democratic. Also dealing with the Brown Act and its restrictions on essentially conversation between officials and just dealing with reality. And so let me start with my most unpopular idea, but one that I would suggest to anyone in neighborhood or city, which is I think you need to the thing you need to start with to get on offense in this game is to go find your own developer. You should try to pick your developer. You should get out there and instead of having developers come at you or your community, go find a developer that's your guy, your in-house guy. As I travel around the state, and I've been to all 482 municipalities in the state over the last 20 years, I'm a little nuts about local government. The biggest single thing on whether particularly a smaller a community or city works is the quality of the most important developer in town. Is that person an honest broker? Are they good at communicating with all different kinds of people? And the reason that is largely because of our laws. A developer, unlike a city council member or a neighborhood council member, can talk to whoever they like. They are not bound by the provisions of the Brown Act. They become the person in Healthy Places who connects the different people. They actually pass messages between staffs and of different levels of government. The developer is essentially the coach of your team. Is that infuriating, that reality? Yes. Is it crazy? Yes. But it's California, and it's how local government works. So if you're a community that wants to be in charge of your own destiny, I would go find a developer too that you like, that wants to work, and invite them to see who's good at this, find someone, recruit them, and say, we're willing to work with you if there's development we want to do in the neighborhood. You're the guy we're going to go to, and we're going to make it very hard for anyone else. I would play that card. I would start there. So that just, it's the other thing that developers can do that you can't do that's very hard is, we don't have government by law anymore at the local level in the United States. We have government it's not by right, everything is in negotiation. And community, those things are controlled by lawyers and insiders. Developers obviously can be at the table at the beginning of a negotiation in a way that our practice and our laws don't really allow the community to be to, even the neighborhood council to be in at the beginning on the ground floor when you're developing things. So having a good developer who's your agent, who you like, who you have great communication with, who you trust, gives you a voice. Again, it's not the way things should be, but it's the way things are. Second, I think, and this is crazy making too, because you're an elected body, different terms, elected to represent your neighborhood in Los Angeles. But that doesn't count for a lot, because we know that neighborhood councils don't necessarily reflect their community's full diversity. There's attempts to, and I admire LA and the structure and the rules and the attempts to get all the different stakeholders in councils, but you still don't necessarily look like your community. So I think if you want to have more impact when you make a statement, the neighborhood council needs to create its own sort of participatory democracy. There are lots of different ways to do that, but whether it's a small citizens jury of people in your neighborhood that is representative and is not on the council, there's all kinds of mini publics. You can do this by sortition. There are all kinds of participatory bodies. You have a little citizens assembly in your neighborhood, but you want to have a body that create a body that is participatory, that actually sort of looks at questions, studies them, devises, and then reports to you. You say you can do that already now, but you're not going to be as representative of that body. You're trying to get people in that body who are not the folks who show up to meetings. You might have to pay them. You say, how could that ever work? How could, where would the money to create a process like that come from? The answer is there is a lot of money in philanthropy and in various places in America to do stuff like this. You may have heard of participatory budgeting. You may have heard of, some of this stuff. There's actually quite a lot of money and interest in doing it in more places. You could raise the money from the nonprofit world, from philanthropy, to create these kinds of mini publics to decide questions where, regular people, a representative group, not the neighborhood council, maybe older and whiter than everybody, and have them bring sort of a decision to you. Or even better, preemptively, say, that's a big piece of land that someone's going to want to develop or someone tried to develop before. What's our plan for it? What does the community want for it? And use one of these mini publics to create a plan. So you have offense. And then you lean on, your handpicked developer to do something in that area. But again, you have to do that kind of aggressive. I mean, again, we see this kind of preemptive sort of participatory planning in a lot of places and a lot of cities around the world. Not so much in the United States. So that's a second point. A third point is, you do have rights, as I read your rules, to have referenda within your neighborhood. It's a tool you should use. It goes beyond the community impact statement, and you put things up to a vote of the people in your neighborhood. I mean, use the direct democracy that is inherent in your rules. And if the rules aren't strong enough for it, insist that they be. Push that. Put things to votes. Particularly if you're on the business end of yet another deal for some sort of development or something that comes at you. That's a good way to open up the conversation, slow things down. Rather than going right to you protest, that's fine, but I would use that tool. Now I want to make two last points and sort of broad demands that I think you should have. One is neighborhood councils in general should be demanding much more public participation support, particularly in a city like LA, where it's a hard place to participate in for a lot of reasons we're familiar with. I mean, we're talking about LA should be at a global standard, where you have robust public offices, lots of people who are there to help, who communicate with you, let you know what's going on, and are available for people who want to do anything they, to help people, guide people to where they need to go. If they need to close a street for a party, there just needs to be a much more robust infrastructure of support for that stuff. We can get into more details of that. The other thing I think you should think about is that the city is failing you, and there's a sort of a global standard emerging in cities for online environments that allow for participation, ideas from people to come forward, reporting of things. I mean, you see the original one is called Decide Madrid. Madrid Decides. It's been adopted by over 100 cities around the world. And these online environments, they're robust. It started with a city council member in who's a computer programmer in Madrid, young guy. But there are these online environments that allow people to decide. I mean, there's, the ruling part of Italy governs itself entirely online. There are these sorts of ways of doing things that allow people to report problems, to offer ideas, to make decisions, even have participatory kind of events and mini publics that exist online, if that's easier and cheaper. But we don't have them, we don't use them. I think I would insist on that. Okay, I think that's enough madness for one opening. So let me stop there. And if anyone wants to talk more about anything I've said or dismiss it out of hand, either would be fine. Thank you.
I certainly will not dismiss it out of hand. I think a lot of that is along the lines of what Doug is talking about. And thank you very much, Doug, for those comments. There is too much self-limiting in the neighborhood council. We can do anything we want. It's just that we don't have a lot of money, and frankly, we don't have a lot of time. And that's one of the challenges, Joe, in doing some of the broad things, because first of all, Doug said, beware, this is not an easy thing to do, to mobilize an effort like you did, that significant effort for that one development. And the same thing with starting yet another neighborhood council when your own isn't even working right. I mean, at some point in time, the management bandwidth of the volunteers is going to be exceeded just doing some of the suggestions you got. But I think that the way we get to have more bodies is to begin doing the kinds of things you're suggesting. It doesn't have to be the grand City of Madrid decision-making system, but it has to be an organization that provides opportunity for many people to come together to make their own thoughts or decisions. And it specifically, in my opinion, should not be a part of the neighborhood council decision-making process by right. In other words, this group should be able to come up with its opinion, and we may agree with the opinion, we may not, we may oppose it, we might take a different opinion, we might have no opinion. But the thing is, there are a group of people in Panorama City who are working with the neighborhood council, and the neighborhood council can fund part of this if they want to, although we can't make direct payments to individuals. But there are a lot of things that we could do to do the Joe Matthews plan light, even though I'm sure you don't like the word light, but I'm trying to be realistic because of the time resources that we've got. Part of that should be actually our committee system. Most neighborhood councils do not have an active enough committee system. The monthly meetings are complete off-putting meetings. Nobody wants to sit through them. You only get 1 minute public comment or two. Nobody can have a discussion. You just sit and watch these people vote on this and vote on that. But in committees, you can have these discussions. In committees, you can bring in more people that look like our real neighborhood online. And so this is a challenge. I know Doug's part of a group the department is putting together to try and see how they could continue to have discussions online. And one thing that intrigues me is if it becomes a Brown Act problem, to hell with it. We'll just have this direct democracy group and they can be online all they want. What do you think, Doug?
Yeah, I actually, Tony's referring to the EVG hybrid working group, which I will tell you has a tremendous potential if the bureaucrats don't completely screw it up. And that's the best I can say at this point.
What is that group? What is that group?
Okay,
And how is it selected?
All right, that's a good question. All right, so when COVID hit and the governor sent out an order essentially saying you can meet online, all right, you don't have to do in-person meetings. The Department of Neighborhood Empowerment created what they called the electronic virtual governance policy, bought everybody a Zoom account, put out some rules, and that's how we've operated. going forward, and this came out of proposed state legislation, which may or may not be signed at this point, essentially saying, well, every city council, county board in places of more than 250,000 population will have to continue to offer an internet option. Now, that actually does not apply to neighborhood councils. But the department, in its desire to be responsive, is seeking to create a policy that would, I hope, at least optionally allow neighborhood councils to, in addition to doing in-person meetings as required by the Brown Act, also do an interactive electronic option for people to attend. And the technical requirements, the operator requirements, and all that, it's a very, very big task. But personally, at least for board meetings, I think we can do it, but it's going to have to be done correctly. And I don't see the direction of the folks involved in that group as being realistic. The group itself, each commissioner, of which there are 7, was asked to appoint 2 people. And then the department apparently picked another 13 people. In looking at the group, I have no idea what their criteria was. As someone who's run a lot of meetings and tries really hard to get groups to focus on practical matters, it's a bit of frustration. I'll put it that way. But it's a tremendous idea that would broaden the reach, but getting from point A to point B in a bureaucratic and very rigid structure of the city. I mean, there's the problem. If they left us alone, we'd do it. And this exactly speaks to what you're talking about. And in terms of things like referenda, our neighborhood council, back when we had elections every year, 15 years ago, we would put referendum questions on the ballot for people who came to vote. So,
I think the point I want to make is that is that essentially the way to fight the bureaucracy is not to do it yourself. I mean, that kind of entity isn't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about building entities that are of people who may be selected at random or sort of formed together, who don't volunteer, but are, that are sort of are representative and are created for a particular conversation or entity. I mean, the simplest, to give an example, I mean, and which you yourself don't control, that you may convene, you may be the venue or help create the process. But for example, say you have a big piece of land that is going to draw development interest, but you don't have a vision of what the community wants from that. So you could call Healthy Democracy in Oregon, which is the best nonprofit in the United States on mini publics, and they would take your call and call you back, and they would raise money from a foundation to have a citizens jury meet, probably maybe over 3 days. They would put together a group from the neighborhood that isn't on the neighborhood council. They're maybe not even know what a neighborhood council is, but are in the neighborhood and would be representative of the demographics and interests of the neighborhood. They would lead a process, mediate a process, bring in people to talk about the land, and eventually those folks would make certain judgments, have ideas, and write up, the people themselves, what they want for that land. You'd have this document. You say, we did a process that's more democratic than anything the city bureaucracy is going to do, and here's what our community wants. So before you stick us with what we don't want, we've done this. That's how you get off. I don't think it has to cost you a dime. There's such a hunger to do this. There isn't, few places in the United States have anything like the neighborhood council system. And so, I mean, people would run to do this. There would be money for it. It does sort of cede power, but your complaint is you don't have any power to begin with. I mean, it's it's and ultimately, if you're doing that kind of process, you come to the table with, with a lot more juice and leverage. And if you can do it preemptively before things are coming at you, before you're playing defense, that's the kind of thing you see. I mean, that's what they did in Vienna. I mean, there they had the story involves a very unusual immigrant politician in the city government who had a lot of different ideas because she hadn't been in Austria very long. She was from Greece, and she'd sort of seen many public issues there. And ultimately, the people sort of get to decide things. It's not you, but you're kind of the convener. You're the middleman. I know that's weird. It's like another structure, but it's essentially a structure that's outside the city bureaucracy, but has the force of best practice and science behind it.
Well, Joe, I'm not against the idea. The
Yeah.
challenge is that everything you're talking about has been based on city planning. And one of the challenges is city planning, A, is so far out of our reach already, and B, getting further and further away as the one-party state. I don't care which side of the spectrum you're on, but absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Sure.
As the one-party state increasingly removes local control over city planning, which is Pam's
That's
issue,
me, yes.
that what happens is what you're suggesting we convene a group about is absolutely the most frustrating thing to take up, in which I can almost guarantee a 99% chance of failure. So I'm interested in your idea of direct democracy, but I'm having great trouble with your suggestion about development and land use.
I mean, I think to me, I hear that, and to be really blunt, it just sounds defeatist. Why bother? Why not just go home? I mean, if you can't win, you're up against the one thing. I'm trying to do that. You don't have to do it for planning. You can do it for any subject. I mean, you can talk about policing in the neighborhood. You can talk about, what do you want what do people want on homelessness? I mean, you can talk about any number of things, and you can put it into a kind of mini public. And I tell you, there are people willing to do that work for you who do it well, and it will even find the money for it. It requires a leap of faith, and it apparently requires a sense that is really, I mean, it's a sort of a defeatist attitude to this. I mean, if you think it's just coming at you, and the only thing to do is sort of sue, get a lawyer and fight and sue, which basically adds to conflict in a society that is lost in conflict, then I mean,
So it's not defeatist, because I'm embracing your technique. I'm
Right.
only saying that it's picking your battles by subject matter, and that might not
Right.
be the most likely place to win.
Sure.
Doug wants to say something.
Yeah, you said the magic word, homeless. So there are 8 neighborhood councils in the 15th council district in the city of
Sure.
Los Angeles. 3 years ago, as homelessness just mushroomed, okay? I mean, it's been here forever, but the numbers became rather staggering. Starting at our neighborhood council, we brought together the other 7. And we said, we are going to, and this is completely outside the legal structure. Okay, maybe this is what you're talking about. We'll see. We said, we are going to create the CD15 working group on homelessness issues. The participants will be whoever shows up at the meeting, to include folks from neighborhood councils, but not appointed officially. Nothing official about this. Okay. Service providers, elected officials ignored us at first and then jumped in when they realized we were doing real stuff. That group's been operating with monthly meetings on these issues, holding, in some cases, hosting some public forums to inform people about proposed solutions. We're doing tours of other homeless areas and solutions. These are all done. This group is totally unofficial. It does
Right,
not
but it's,
belong
but
to
again,
anybody.
but it's done
It's-
by neighborhood councils of elected officials and
It's,
you
no,
guys
no, no, no.
yourself, LA
It's,
officials.
no, it started with neighborhood council
Right.
and we kept it unofficial.
Mhm.
Public, like I say, public officials, they were not involved at the beginning. They did not become involved until they realized that this group was actually making an impact on the public.
Right.
Anybody who wanted to come and join, it was completely open.
Yeah, that doesn't work. That's where you go off. It's not about completely
Okay.
open to all, because when you do that, you lose the representation, you lose the sense of an argument for democracy. I mean, you have to have something that is actually representative, where you're pulling, where you get somebody who can get you a representative body that really reflects it, and it's people who don't know about the thing are pulled in. They may be paid for their time, and actually to give you where the public actually is on the subject. That gives you power to actually say where the public is, not just the people who chose to show up. I mean, you know, that sort of thing, it's easy to discredit. Well, that's people have these particular stakeholders, these particular interests. But no, you need to assemble in small a vision of the whole and get that group to tell you something. I mean, the hard part for that is that, you know, when you do it your way, when you're convening, you still have control. It is a giving up of control. That is where I'm just telling you, in the world, people who successfully have, you know, neighborhood power are moving in that direction. We're not moving that direction in the United States. We're not moving that direction in very few places in California. I mean, we're so out of sorts, you know, we're in a place in Paris, you know, we're at a moment where school site budgets are turned over to students to decide how the money is spent in participatory processes like these, you know, but you know, in Portugal, even elementary students participate in that kind of decision making or are eligible to it. But here we're totally the opposite. I mean, it may just be that what I'm suggesting goes beyond our mindset or beyond what people perceive as possible. But I'm telling you that that sort of kind of meeting, as you're saying, you've been doing it for 3 years and it didn't work, right?
No, it does work. It works very well.
How does it work? What is it delivered?
It delivers, well, two things. Originally, the group was formed because, you know, neighborhood councils had homeless committee meetings and people showed up.
Mhm.
And you spent most of the meeting explaining reality to folks,
Right.
you know, who thought every homeless person out there is addicted, alcoholic, a bum, whatever. It's like, no, you're talking about a distinct minority and you know, all the rest of it. So the number one thing is we realized we got to educate people, because people are out there going to public meetings, saying things, and they haven't got a clue. So that was the first thing. Actually, the first thing was we need to educate ourselves. Okay. And then the second thing was we need to provide a forum for people. And believe me, there are people who had very different opinions and still do. But we were able to bring folks together every month in a place where they could say their piece without feeling threatened on a very controversial issue. And ultimately, as solutions began to come down, the bridge home projects, safe parking, you know, now the pallet shelter homes, permanent supportive housing, there was a group, and it's probably, I don't know, 30, 40 people. And on average, there's more than that, but not everybody comes to every meeting, who can speak with some authority. But here's my question to you. If the convening body, whether it be a neighborhood council or not, is essentially picking this diverse group, How is that different?
The neighborhood council would not pick the group.
Who picks the group?
No one. It's done, it can be done by sortition. It can be done by some sort of entity that comes in and knows how to do these mini publics. They use randomness. They look at, who are the people, they look at the demographics, and then they use sort of random things to pick people and invite them until they build they're trying to build a representative group of folks. It's to take it out of your hands or anyone else's and to simply put in the hands of people, say, this is a representative group of our people. We've looked at this question on policing or planning or homelessness or, what have you. We've heard testimony, we've done it, and we've made a decision. We've been educated on it. We come to it. You can do it more than once. But it's that kind of approach that is becoming the standard in the democratic world.
Joe, I've got to say, I completely see where you're coming from, and you're a passionate advocate specifically for direct democracy in your direct democracy project, for a recognizable institution that can achieve recognizable goals. That's the smaller the community, the more likely that is to work. When you have one of the biggest cities in the world, as complex as Los Angeles is, you have to become realistic. And one of the things that maybe I would like to suggest, because I think we have a crisis of this in America, I think we have a dialogue that's completely broken between the two political extremes. I think we have an identity politics that doesn't understand the importance of culture, that this is not as simple as that. I think that a lot of this stuff that we're seeing, all this postmodern deconstruction of our society, is because we have failed in the United States I'm sorry, Pam, especially in public education, to provide any meaningful civic and historical social education in schools. There is zero understanding of government in the people today, and we have a complete lack of people who want to get directly involved. If all we did was to take the city charter responsibility to empower other people like us to understand the system and maybe begin to build their own coalitions, even if they were direct democracy things.
I'm not talking about direct democracy. I'm not an advocate. I'm simply saying, I'm reporting to you that sort of the loop you're locked in looks less and less like in big cities all over the world. It looks primitive. Is that probably the nicest word I can use? And you should think about creating mini publics that do this. That seems to be better than people who are previously elected. I like representative democracy. I'm a Californian. I studied direct democracy. I'm deeply aware of how bad direct democracy can be because of the California experience is not an entirely good one. It's in fact a largely negative one in our history, used for some things. But again, like if you can't get out of the box of it has to sort of come from us and has to be open to just who shows up. You can't get to what's becoming a standard for a democratic decision. And I think if you got to that standard, and it can be done because lots of people have done it, you would have a real weapon for your neighborhood and your community, in part because so few others are doing it here.
Well, actually, I'm suggesting that maybe we have embraced your idea, but our solution, at least what's going on in my head, doesn't look like what you would choose, and you simply say that doesn't work. Because a lot of the things that I feel an obligation to do is to help the other people in my community do their own work. I'm not going to be around here. I'm 79. But what we need to do is to make certain that the young people who are out there today who have no clue how the system works, they think that rioting in the streets changes the system. or, you know, the whole system is systematically, whatever it's systematically. There's just no understanding. We have to replace
I mean,
this.
I don't know that I think that, I'm not sure the youth understanding, I don't see data that the youth understanding is any worse than the old people understanding. But be that as it may, does the neighborhood council have a youth council that has real power? I mean, the place I know in the state of California where young people have the most power and the most influence on local governments, and it's a very healthy community, is a town called Gonzales, 10,000 people, 20 miles south of Salinas in Monterey County. They have a couple layers of a youth city council that has real power, that writes laws, that's, taken incredibly powerful actions, and also done the most significant study on police community relations. We're talking about 16, 17, 18-year-olds and a few younger than that. But that kind of stuff is, again, around the world. You see it, whether it's participatory budgeting in schools, whether it's, youth and even child parliaments. You see some bodies that are, that tie to climate.
Well,
We don't have that here. We're
as we speak, Joe, as we speak.
Everyone, really
this
quick,
time-
I'm sorry if I could just interrupt. So,
I think John Darnell's ready to go home.
no, it's okay. I think this is a great discussion. I think I'll stay on to allow it if people want to stay on, because I think
No, I
this
want to make a quick,
is valuable, but I just want to let everyone know it's we're supposed to end in like a minute or two.
okay, but let me just
I'll give you
respond.
10 more minutes until I log off, because
Okay, no, let me just respond to Joe, because as we are speaking now, there are a group of young people that we have brought together to discuss exactly this. It's called Involving Youth in Neighborhood Councils at All Levels, not just these boutique youth councils that do things like
Right.
cleanups. That's an insult to the youth. And I am a firm believer in the 16-year-old voting movement, because that's the only way that proven, and it's true in Europe, they vote early while they're still in school, they'll keep on voting. So, but a lot of this is incremental. All of us can be passionate, but sometimes the road to where you want to go isn't, it's limited by the resources you have, and it's limited by the challenges you have to face. But if I take away anything from this, and I am taking it away from it, is your passion for involving people other than us little deliberative groups, specifically representative groups that look like our community in our community. I'm not sure how we do that, but it will be a tremendous gift if we are able to pull off those ideas.
All right.
So I welcome everybody else to make a quick statement at the end so that John can go home.
Okay, I'm going to speak up because I kind of didn't get to say what I wanted, but thank you to Barbara Brody who put it in the chat. So because the state has decided to usurp the power of local land use committees throughout the state, there is a movement to put on the 2022 ballot an initiative. The organization is communitiesforchoice.org, and they've changed the name of the initiative to what is absolutely true. It is now called Stop the Sacramento Land Grab. And so I heartily urge all of us as individuals to support this. They need to fundraise like crazy. We need to, there is also ACA 7 by very brave Assembly Member Murat Sachi, but our state legislators have proven that they're under the thumb of the developers, and they're not, that is never going to pass in my opinion. So I really hope that all of you who are still here listening, and anyone and everyone else who cares about your neighborhood, and that there should still be single family homes for people to aspire to, please get behind this initiative and go out and give money and get ready to gather signatures when the approval comes for that.
Thank
That's
you.
my 2 cents.
Doug,
What?
do you have any parting thoughts for our friends in the audience?
No, but I've been scribbling down all the names of these organizations Joe mentioned, and I'm gonna go look them up.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
So I remind everybody that you can save the chat by touching the three little dots at the lower right hand of the chat screen. I'll put my email in the chat. That will save to your local computer if you are on a desktop, Mac or Windows. If you're on a mobile, which is a phone or tablet, unfortunately, you can't save the chat, but there are probably some useful things that got in there. And I thank you all for coming, and I thank Joe for your inspiration, because I think you planted a seed. It may grow into a weed that you don't recognize, but you say, I recognize those weeds, they got it all wrong. But it's been a tremendous gift, and I thank you very much for that gift.
Thanks very much for putting up for me, and good luck to what you're doing. It's impressive to have this many people having this conversation on a Saturday afternoon, and thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you. So go forth, have a great weekend, whatever is left of it. And congratulations for you guys for staying to the end. And we really appreciate your coming. And thank you, John, for letting us have a few more minutes.